Hi, folks. Welcome to Crisco's Corner. Unfiltered commentary. Not your truth, the real truth. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for your support. Hi, folks. Welcome back. From PJ Media. Excellent site, by the way, for conservative people. Joe Biden, no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. Now, I know this is a few days old, but I think it's something worth looking at. No amendment to the Constitution is absolute, or just the amendments I don't care for aren't absolute. Let's read it, and then we're going to go through a little bit. The 13th Amendment, as we all know, was passed just prior to Abraham Lincoln being assassinated, that made slavery unlawful, finally, in the United States. It was way overdue. It should have been done long before that, but unfortunately, it just didn't work out that way. And we've been recovering from it ever since, and I think we've been making huge progress when it comes to race relations in the United States. Even Barack Obama, not too many years ago, said, problems with race in our country are about 90% solved. We just need to go that little bit, 10% more. Nothing will be perfect, but we can get closer. And actually, tell you the truth, when he said it, it's one of the few things he said I agree with. I think Dr. King would be very pleased. But you would never know by the media and Black Lives Matter and all the other organizations. It's way better. We're so racist, we elected a non-white individual twice as president. They say, well, using that example, he's an exception. No, he's not. He's not at all. It's not an exception. They'll say, well, Mitt Romney choked. Come on, people still elected him, okay? They still elected him. Let's read on before I get carried away with this nonsense. On Thursday, President Joe Biden announced new executive actions on gun control, trying to limit ghost guns. That's where it's going to start. Ghost guns are the ones that are made with 3D printers. You have to buy some metal parts that you can get very easily when you put your ghost gun together. There's no serial number. There's no tracing. Now, I might go in a little bit more depth in the Second Amendment in another episode, but I read it just as it says. The right to bear arms should not be infringed. Infringe your right to bear arms. I forgot the exact wording, but it means you cannot take that right away from somebody. Ghost guns would make it easier for flag their own family members who shouldn't be allowed to purchase firearms. Announcing his gun restrictions, Biden specifically addressed the Second Amendment. When Biden insisted that none of his gun control measures impinged on the Second Amendment, he also insisted that no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. Fire bells should be ringing off. That's a testing the waters, put up a trial balloon, whatever you want to call these politicians do. And they do it on both sides. But he's doing it in this case. See what the public's reaction is. For those of you that don't own firearms, not part of your culture, not part of your history, not part of your family's history, like, I don't care. You should. You should care. Because taking away someone's rights in your own country, just because it doesn't affect you, doesn't mean it's wrong. We can turn around and say, make an amendment to the Constitution that all non-white people can't vote. Well, I'm white, doesn't affect me any. No, it doesn't work that way. Wrong is still wrong. Nothing I'm about to recommend in any way impinges on the Second Amendment. They're phony arguments suggesting that these are Second Amendment rights at stake for what we're talking about. Then came the key statement. But no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. Well, a court ruled years ago that you can. Recall the freedom of speech from the very beginning. You couldn't own any weapon you wanted to own. And he went on. And I covered this a little bit in one of my episodes, Samuel Adams quote. But I think let's go to the 13th Amendment. He's talking about the Second Amendment here. Let's go to the 13th Amendment and let's study that a little bit. This is from a reference.com. I punched in 13th Amendment summary, and I had several to choose from. This is one I decided. This was written updated just recently, April 17th. What is the summary of the 13th Amendment of the Constitution? This shows a black man there. I'm assuming he's portraying a slave or a former slave. The 13th Amendment of the Constitution pertains to the abolition of slavery and involuntary servitude, which is the same. It was adopted on December 6th, 1865, as part of the suite of amendments passed in response to the Civil War regarding civil rights and black suffrage. The 13th Amendment contains two sections. In the first section, the amendment abolishes both slavery and involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime resulting from a conviction. In other words, hard labor, or you have to work in the prison laundry room or whatever, a kitchen or whatever they decide. Now, let's take that apart. What part of that is not absolute? We'd go over the first section. The amendment abolishes both slavery and involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime resulting from a conviction. What part of that, President Biden, is not absolute? I can't see anything in there that could possibly be changed that is absolute. The section gives Congress the right to pass legislation to ensure that the provisions of the first section are properly enforced. After it was passed, the Fugitive Slave Clause and the Three-Fifths Compromise were nullified. That's the other thing. I used to own, I just recently sold my convenience store in a very low income area, very high non-white population compared to the county here in upstate New York. And one of the mothers I've been befriended years ago was talking to her son, and he mentioned, well, Three-Fifths Compromise. That's been misconstrued and lied about. What it was when they did the census, put the census in the law in the Constitution that every 10 years there's a census. The Southern slaveholders wanted all slaves counted. They would give them more political power, more Congress members. The North said, listen, you asshats, slavery is wrong. It sucks. It's evil. You say that these people you own aren't human, at least not the human you think is human, the human to have rights, so we're not going to count any. Call your bluff. Well, the compromise was made on 3/5. The North wanted 0. The South wanted 100%. It doesn't mean you're 3/5 of a person. It was a compromise based on census totals for congressional seats. Yeah, did it suck? Was it wrong? Yeah. But it's not that everybody in the U.S. thought a non-white person was 3/5 of a human. That's BS, and it always has been. The crafting and passage of the amendment followed the issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation by President Abraham Lincoln. That was really iffy, the Emancipation Proclamation, in the legal sense. We're not talking about morals here now. We're talking about legalities. Abraham Lincoln's take was, I'm emancipating these people only in states that are in rebellion against the United States. So the border states didn't count. Delaware at the time, Delaware was a slave state, so was Maryland. Joe Biden's now home state of Delaware was a slave state. Of course, he doesn't mention it much. Should he pay extra reparations? No. Well, he shouldn't pay any. But I digress. Because they were in rebellion, a warring nation against the United States. While the U.S., the North, could not call the Confederacy a nation. So technically he was skirting around the law. And I'll tell you the truth, it probably wouldn't have held up to court scrutiny, but he did it anyway. He felt it was right to do. Among the primary participants in the writing and passage of the amendment were Secretary Seward. Any of you seen the movie Lincoln? incredibly well done. No, it's not 100% historically accurate, but it certainly conveys the thoughts at the time. It's high production value, meaning the clothes, the backgrounds, the actors, the thoughts at the time. Lincoln said, all freed slaves shouldn't vote, just the educated ones, the ones that are in the army. Well, that'd be racist now, but you have to put it in the context of 1865. You can't use today's standards back then, and that's what these leftists and progressives do. We've come a long, long ways. Yes, the abolition of slavery came too late, but it came at the expense of over 600,000 Americans dead. And God knows how many millions wounded for life and the destruction of lives by the millions. Yeah, so there was a price to pay. Thaddeus Stevens, Charles Sumner. Stevens was a real radical. He wanted all Confederate land seized and given to black slaves to make farms, and they would have basically pushed the whites out because they rebelled. The amendment first passed in the Senate in April 1864, but did not pass the House until July 31st, 1865. The amendment was adopted after it was ratified by 27 states, with the first ratification coming from Illinois on February 1st. Former Confederate states, including Virginia, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Tennessee, also ratified the amendment in 1865. Now look at that. Those weren't all carpetbaggers, by the way, that went down and took over these state governments. Virginia was always iffy. They were one of the last states to officially secede. Arkansas, wow, they're backward hicks and they're all racist. Baloney. It was split down the middle in the South as well concerning slavery. In Tennessee, well, they're backward hicks too. Well, by the way, it was the state of Tennessee vote to ratify an amendment that gave the women the right to vote. Well, these backward hicks aren't so backward after all, are they? Anything in there, anything in this amendment, and it's very clear. I mean, for legalese and written by lawyers, this is crystal clear wordage. I'll read it one more time. President Biden, what part of this is not absolute? The amendment abolishes both slavery and involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime resulting from a conviction. The second section gives Congress the right to pass legislation to ensure the provisions of the first section are properly enforced. So the amendment and then its protection under the law, such as a fugitive slave clause and a three-fifths compromise, were nullified. And interesting enough, after all this was said and done, the people in the South wanted to count all the blacks in the census. It gave them more Congress members, thus more power in the U.S. House of Representatives. This is complicated. It's not so black and white, pardon the pun, as people make out. So again, I'll ask the question. Put it in the comments below. For those of you that agree with President Biden, that no amendment is absolute, you tell me what part of the 13th Amendment is not absolute. And by the way, I might add, it was Democrats that were against it. It was Democrats that seceded from the Union. It was Democrats that were the slaveholders. I don't want to hear about the big switch or any of those lies. What part of this is not absolute, President Biden? You tell us. You tell us what part is not absolute. Until next time, folks, goodbye and good luck.